Hello everyone, this is Chaco here, and today I'm very happy to have Andreas Dreki, who's a dear friend of mine, with us for sharing some of the insights he's having with regard to the solar eclipse that's going to happen on the 8th of April 2024, that is tomorrow. And we organized this call because we felt that this is an interesting and very important moment with regard to the human collective as we journey into the next cycle of evolution. So this is somewhere we want to have a conversation of what is going to happen, what the solar eclipse is going to reveal, what's going to bring the humanity towards. So there are a lot of things going around on the internet talking about solar eclipse. So we would like to contribute to this information base that is already there, some of our own interpretation, and especially Andreas, who is really good in that, bringing in mythology and other aspects to that, and sharing what he understands for him, what it truly stands as the symbol of this solar eclipse that is happening in 2024. Very crucial from the United States perspective, because we are preparing for the elections that's coming in the month of November in the US. So that's very interesting to see how everything is revealing itself. And also, if you look from the international perspective, with the Olympic Games coming up in a very few months, organized in France, where I am based right now, and also geopolitically, a lot of stuff happening in the last weeks with regard to Israel, Iran, and others. So we'll touch on these aspects, and of course, other deeper mythological aspects to this particular thing. So before diving deep, I would like to introduce Andreas to all of you. So Andreas has more than 10 years of experience in facilitating different group processes through shamanic rituals and practices where he guides people to integrate mind, heart, and body. He is a drummer and a flute player, and over the last 6 years, he has been diving deeply into the aspects of sexuality through ISTA, International School of Temple Arts, and he's also connected with Hayden Temple in New Zealand, where he has been part of archetypal group experiment that works with rheology. That's something he's going to speak also during this call. He can at least hint what exactly is that. And he has explored mythology and community living in connection with group initiation. So group initiation is something which, let's say, Andreas is very keen on. And that's something what the Aquarian energy is going to bring the collective, human collective towards that. Andreas is also an astrologer with a passion for how cosmological narratives shape our culture. And over the last year, he has held different astrology courses on a monthly basis and also held temples around Europe. He's currently offering 3-month online journey called Mercury. And he recently traveled to Peru, studying ancient temple cultures and their ways. And today he's actually sitting in Argentina, and where he's going to be for the next 1 month, initiating land journeys and working with people in the land of Argentina to initiate a temple culture over there. So I welcome Andreas for this journey into diving deep into the aspects of the solar eclipse. Thank you, Andreas, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm here in Argentina and feeling very grateful that you are having me on your podcast. There's a little bit of a sound coming in the back now as we're beginning here with a beautiful vibratory energy here from the kind of beginning of the Andes, and I feel like this is this is a place right now that I'm sensing that something is beginning to move, at that very point between the agricultural, I'm right at the border where, there's thousands of miles of agriculture laid out all over Argentina, a lot of cattle, a lot of wine, And we're right here. Funny, that's the sound from a tractor, and I'm right at the border before the jungle and the wild jungle that then leads up to the Andes. And I feel like there's kind of like a symbolic moment for humanity in the place that I find myself, as we're still hearing the buzzing of the agricultural narrative. I feel like that is very much also seen through the astrology, because the 10,000 years of agriculture, which has very much been also the 10,000 years of patriarchy, it's clear to see that agriculture comes hand in hand with military, the privatization of land and the way that agriculture was revolutionized by the science of astronomy and how that could prepare the very practical elements of farming, and that being kind of the way that in Sumeria and Mesopotamia, there were thresholds that kind of had a jump in evolution, and especially in the agricultural evolution. And we have little thresholds of the wheel being invented, and then we have moments where this agricultural orientation or narrative that kind of also shaped the astrology that we know today, the zodiac that we know today. This is a northern hemisphere tradition, and it's one important factor that I want to bring, also a theme around a conversation around today, is this inquiry around the narrative that changed 10,000 years ago from astrology being an initiatory, orientational kind of art, or a science or a certain tradition that help people integrate and orient and navigate. So it helped people kind of synchronize with the rhythms that we are within, as we're moving, the planet are moving around the sun, and the sun is moving with all these other planets, and this big body as the solar system is moving through cosmos. And somehow, the indigenous culture is also very much, whether you go southern hemisphere or northern hemisphere, all over the earth has had the sky to orient, and orienting with the stars has very much been, how to establish a way on earth that reflects the rhythms that are happening up in the sky, that we can observe, that we are within. And so what then kind of happens with agriculture is that, whoever is ruling or attempting to kind of rule a certain land or a certain area, or privatize that and protect that land with its military complex, has used, we call it the rulers also of the astrology. There are certain impacts of the planets being in certain places in the cycle on the ecliptic path that's seen from the earth, which is basically just reflecting the soul, or the shining part, the heart of our being, the fueling sun that's kind of giving life to the rest of our solar system. And I feel like the symbolic way that we have observed that path and kind of created a narrative that is that path seen from the earth, or from the body that we have now, the personality, you could say, that is the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and that the soul holds a different component, which is somehow also within the earth, the fire that lives within the earth. So the fire element is really also kind of holding the pointing to the soul, or to the shining part, or the transforming part, because as we know, working with the elements, we can be conditioned in the body, we can contaminate the earth, we can be conditioned in the emotions, we can contaminate the waters, we can be conditioned in the mind, we can contaminate the air. But when we get down to the element of fire, it transforms. It kind of brings about new, land, which it does when the lava bursts up, and we see how it shapes new continents. And so somehow the inner fire and the outer fire represents this part also that illuminates, that shines, so we can become aware. So there's a certain element of the awareness. And so I would like to bring awareness to this eclipse that's coming up, which has a very interesting theme, as it's, in Aries. So Aries, before it has come into a mythological kind of orientation that was influenced by kind of the different narratives that was going around, and the different ways that, you know, in Egypt and in Babylon and in the Greek, coming down into what was becoming the new kind of developmental center of evolution, which was Alexandria, or at least the modern civilization as we know it today. This is where the horoscopal chart system is kind of born and considered in a whole new way. And so there is the fusion of the many different astronomies, astrologies that are coming from the kind of agricultural, the initiatory, which comes very much from Kemet or from Egypt, with the Deccan system, and then also the philosophy that has kind of developed up in Europe, and especially the Greek and the Roman, which kind of comes down with Alexander the Great to Egypt. And so, as we know, Aries, or as some of you know, Aries, it's the first sign of the zodiac. It's the ram. And before it is the ram, it is cardinal fire. And so these are the two layers that are kind of ruling this area, or we have kind of decided that this is the energy that has come to rule that area. And especially this is what we're feeling in the spring in the Northern Hemisphere. It's like the first spark of life, the first, you know, glimpse of spring. So that is why it has the kind of a new cycle. It has a fertility to it. It has a richness to it.
Okay, that's why most of the traditions were linking that to the eros kind of thing. You know, the spring is where you express your erotic energies, whether it's with the land or with another person. It's also linked to that cardinal fire energy. Is it that?
Yeah, especially kind of the cardinal fire. So the fire element is very linked to, as we know it in the tarot, the wands, which is, you know, the creative energy and the sexual energies. So this is really the spark of life that's beginning to come into, I mean, now for a new cycle, you know, around the zodiac. And this is the part where, you know, the earth is kind of looking up at the sun, and we're in the spring. So we're relating to Aries as that first spark of life, or the little buds are coming out. And you know, it's very important to say that this is only the Northern Hemisphere, because it's a kind of reverse process, or also, you know, once we go into different environments, you know, you have different kind of seasons than the 4 seasons, or you have more like 2 distinct seasons of a rainy season or a dry season, or you know, you can't really apply the system that comes from a certain location in, you know, all the other areas. But there is something universal in working with the elements or the directions, which is kind of a way that has meant to give us direction. We're saying, you know, the 4 directions, or the elements that are bringing us into orientation for direction, you could say. So it's meant to, as we become intimate with it, direct us. So that's a way where, you know, astrology or astronomy, wherever it was, it has components of navigation. I mean, we know this from also the Polynesians or the Vikings that oriented out at sea. And, you know, we know even from the Northern Hemisphere that we've also been orienting very much with the Big Dipper, which is where the rheology also stemmed from. And that has been very much to see the clock of the year. So you see the Big Dipper kind of go tick around the Polaris, the North Star. And in the Southern Hemisphere, you know, there are many different you know, orientations, but one that has been very predominant in the Southern Hemisphere is orienting with the Southern Cross, or, you know, different traditions call it different things, but also in Peru, they would refer to it as the Shakana. And so they have different celebrations, but all of them are connected to different initiatory stages of an evolution, also of a person's life, but also of the planetary life as we're moving with other cycles within cycles. So it was meant to kind of synchronize the people with the rhythms that are actually creating a certain music between us, and, you know, in our relationship to being on earth and to each other and to our own journey. And so it kind of gives us a compass. And so as we begin to talk about this eclipse today, I just want to bring awareness to then, the time that we're in, which is a very much an informational jungle time that we've found ourselves in at the moment, and a lot of propaganda, a lot of mercury moving through the media. So mercury is this component that's meant to actually bring the messages from the soul to the personality, or bridge from the fire to the rest of the system. And he's the illuminator, so he brings intuition. But when mercury is mediating through the media and penetrating the mental field with all the narratives that kind of perpetuates the agricultural, the military, you could say the very essence of it kind of comes from perhaps something that was very innocent and wanting to take care of the tribe, but became then a blind spot of, we want to make sure we have food for everyone tomorrow. But if we cannot actually just trust the way that the earth unfolds in her seasons and the fruits that is given, then we become more and more, we can see the development over 10,000 years, that now we have monoculture, we have mono agriculture, we have, very much come into a farming, modality that has created nutritionally deficient soil. And, the nourishment that we're getting is not the same as when we were really just trusting how the earth, sometimes we had maybe periods where we were fasting, or we had to be with times where there wasn't much food, or we had to learn how to then navigate and orient to follow where are the trails that then brings us into a new environment that then maybe had mushrooms, or had or the hunt that we were connected to in certain areas. There were certain animals, and so we were much more with the cycle of the earth and moving with the earth in the kind of Paleolithic times. And for some reason, we're entering this time of the agricultural and of the kind of wanting to control and navigate what's happening on the earth, and that has certain consequences. Who knows what we're needing to go through this to learn. But there's certain themes that are coming to a threshold now, and that's really a thing that I want to bring out today.
Okay, so earlier before stars, earlier we were talking about the new cycle of Mercury. So are we entering a new cycle of Mercury? That's what you wanted to say earlier. And if that's the case, the fact that this solar eclipse is happening tomorrow on the 8th of April, does it have any impact? As you said, like Mercury is the mediator, the media who's going to illuminate. So there is this moment of solar eclipse where the sun is usually considered as the soul, or the awareness part, the conscious part. Suddenly there is this something coming in front of a kind of a wheel coming in front of the sun, and thus that particular moment of darkness Mercury will reveal certain things of the unconscious of the collective. That's my question.
Yeah, so amazing question, because what actually we're right in now, I want to talk about every placement that's now around this eclipse, which is in the very beginning of Aries. We have Venus, which is beginning her new cycle. She's just crossed over from Pisces, so she's beginning her new cycle. We're beginning a new cycle of relationship, whether it's to our beloveds or between nations. There's a theme of relationship that's beginning to take a new cycle. So she's kind of on the one side, which also is related to the Two of Wands. So there is that. And then we're having the eclipse happening, in the North Node, which is also the direction of where we're going. It's the head of the dragon. And so the head of the dragon also has a component very curious at this point, which aligns to the second with Chiron. So we're having the eclipse, we're having the moon go right in front of the sun, which also allows us, from the sun's perspective, if we're oriented as a soul, we're being able to shine upon the dark side of the moon. So we're able to see the parts of our shadow that we cannot see from the earth. With our soul, we can have a gaze at the dark side of the moon. the part we can never see from our personality, you could say. We can see that from our soul. So this is happening as the eclipse is happening. It's happening in the North Node. So it's really beginning to give a little glimpse to our destiny. And as we have Mercury right on the other side, which is, within the last 10 degrees, it's in the 24th degree of Aries. It's the esoteric ruler of Aries. So it brings that difference between Mars ruling Aries as the personality ruler, because Mars is kind of the soldier going into war. There's the ignition in Mars that just has the passion and the impulsive, movement towards, death, basically, or the willingness to die. He's the soldier. So the soldier, it's the aspiration for soul, but it's the kind of premature aspiration for soul that, the stirring of hormones brings to outburst into the world. And so we need Mars later when we come into Scorpio, because we need Mars to gaze inwards into the depths of our own inner worlds and underworld, and to have that warrior spirit going inwards to face our own war, our own darkness, our own polarity that is in tension. And that's also kind of the tension between the soul and the personality, or kind of the tension between, being in matter, between life and death. So that threshold is very much then brought forth with Mercury, who's also he's the psychopomp. He's been to the underworld. He knows how to journey in the shadow world, and he knows how to navigate, so because he illuminates and he's linked with the soul, he knows how to see in the dark, basically. So he is the esoteric ruler of Aries. So now, as we're having him on the other side of this eclipse, we can have a gaze into also that difference between the agricultural narrative and the initiatory narrative, or the narrative of initiation, or of acknowledging cycles, celebrating cycles, and helping integrate and helping synchronize with the rhythms of planets and the different rhythms that we're moving through as living on this planet. So basically, there's a moment here which also is reflected very much, in the personality realm, where, Mars is very much in ruling the media. So you could say it's not Mercury mediating through it, because it's not the soul transmitting through the media. It's the personality that's eager for at this point, righteousness. There's a lot of tension stirring, especially I feel the specific thing that's going on in the Olympics, which is interesting because Mercury is also the kind of referred to as the one who is, the guardian of the Olympics. He's the one in flight. He's the one that kind of holds the mythology of the athletes, the kind of way to have, he shows the way to create a certain container to move energy. He's the fire that has learned how to contain, his direction of energy. So basically Mars, which is kind of like the wild passion, which we need in the body to give us vitality and to ground, to come up into the heart from the earth with the kind of the earth Kundalini, or the kind of the earth energy to ground us. We need that fire of Mars and to give us vitality. But if it doesn't have Mercury's kind of illuminating awareness, or kind of Mercury's orientation with the intuition, that outbursts is kind of going in directions which is not really helpful for us as a whole in harmony. And in harmony, I say that because what Mercury brings, he's the ruler of the fourth ray, which is also kind of from conflict to harmony. And so almost, he's kind of considered, the trickster, or the counterculture element of what always brings us out of the dogmatic stagnation that we have found ourselves in. Certain moments where like, we got it all figured out, it's democracy, it's, this is the way forth. And, there's an arrogance that comes sometimes with You know, the way that a certain development seems like more evolutionary than another, you know, but the kind of inability to see the bigger picture of the whole, you know, and the different gifts in the diversity of people. And I feel like that is very much the reflection that we get through the Olympics, because we have people from all over the world, from many different cultures, that have learned how to create a structure. And, you know, through the games, through the rules of the game, they are moving energy. So there's a lot going on, because there's a lot of charge in the different cultures, or the different, you can say, collective entities of a nation that, you know, are cheering their component in the game. And then there's a lot of the passion that can come up and be moved. So there's a lot of, you know, the competitiveness, you know, the war energy basically can begin to move in a different way. Because you also see, you know, at the end of the match, you know, it doesn't matter who won or who lost. There's still the recognition. Thank you for the game. You know, thank you for actually being part of also, you know, pushing me to my edges, helping me learn, helping me grow, because you kind of saw it from a different angle. You've had different time of, you know, looking at certain strategies, or you've had certain times of strengthening that, or within your genetic body, there's like a certain tendency to have more, you know, that development, or or a different development, because you're living in that environment that is colder or that is hotter. So there's all this exchange between the differences that is happening on sub-energetic layers through the Olympics. So what is happening right now is very much the eclipsing moment. Like the moon is going in front of the sun. Like you know, we're having what is shining into our world to give us awareness, to orient us, to make us see where we're going and become conscious of what's around. We're having that, you know, veiled for a moment, you know, by what actually pulls our emotional body, the moon. You know, so when that is veiling the sun, there's a real moment where our shadow, the dark side of the moon, can only be gazed upon from the sun, as I was saying. But we're really having an overlayer of like, okay, the earth sees the darkness for a moment in the middle of daylight. And this, I feel, is the component of, I mean, whoever was the decision point, or whatever was the decision point, which is also an archetypal expression, that decided to reject Russia in the participation of the Olympics. And this creates a tension, you know, because what we need now is not more separation, or, you know, kind of pushing further groups of this one being that we are, pushing further, you know, it's one organ to our big body. You know, if we push that out or push it away, you know, we're becoming deceased, because we need the whole to contribute to move the energy together. So I see the tension that's now created. This is very much the theme of what's going on between the personality of the, you know, the collective personality having the suggestion of the collective soul. Like we're being suggested to enter more of a soul, you know, a soul oriented culture that considers the whole. Like we're just reflections of each other. We're just expressions of diversity, and all of us have gift for each other, you know? And so this this eclipse is right on the Chiron, which is the wounded healer. So we're piercing right into our wounding, which is to put a certain part of us out, to say, no, they are doing something we're not agreeing with. But, you know, that's the scapegoat, you know, dynamic, which we can never integrate that part if we keep pushing parts out. And so this is very much the kind of the journey of Chiron, to learn how to accept the wound, or the karma, or the conditioning that has been brought forth in the, you know, in the initiatory cultures. There's a certain recognition of a cycle. When the Saturn comes return, there's like, okay, here's the karma that you've come in to reveal as the Saturn returns complete. now the identification can move from the personality or the conditioning that you've taken on from your ancestors to becoming identified with the soul in that next journey until you're 59, which is that next Saturn cycle, which is then to gaze upon the themes that have been studied in the first cycle, which reveals themes of, you know, the wounds or the different journeys that we have studied in that time, to say, okay, this is the tension point. So this is the conflict that I'm here to bring harmony or to bring my soul gifts through. So that's very much the Mercury. You know, Mercury is the alchemist. You know, he's the one who, you know, recognizes, you know, the difference between the Hermetics and the Gnostics is, you know, the Gnostics were kind of reaching somewhere else for the full integration. You know, this is just a place to, you know, the flesh is the preparation for the next place, you know. But the Hermetics or the basically the teachings of Thought that comes down to then Hermes Trismegistus, which is all the archetype of Mercury that moves in the basic archetype of the writer or the recorder of the cycles. Basically, he is the recorder or the writer of the moon. So once he's the record keeper, we can, as we have the record keeper, we can orient. We know where we are in the cycle, and now, you know, bringing even this conversation, you know, it's time to know where we are in the cycle. And as we know where we are in the cycle, it also aligns us with a different rhythm, because there is so many suggested rhythms that are, you know, introduced to us by the Gregorian calendar that rings the bell on the square, you know, the Masonic square that, you know, tells the story of the one who went through the initiation. So we don't, you know, the rest of us doesn't have to go through that, you know, psychological death of the crucifixion or whatever the disempowering narrative of the ruler has become to disorient us. So now it's almost like a time to see that Chiron, to see, okay, this has wounded us perhaps for 10,000 years of patriarchy or possessiveness of land, and has become the narcissistic way that, you know, is often in relationship to one another. But this has also been our teacher for 10,000 years. And what have we learned? And what is the next steps to then move on from here? You know, instead of making all of that wrong, you know, what have we actually learned, and what can we, you know, I think of it often in terms of music, because it's like, okay, we stroke a chord that was not quite in harmony, or it was not part of the scale, but then it was almost like creating a new scale or opening up to new ways of music, you know, to embrace that mistake, you know, and see, there's a different pathway of a different music that can begin to move from a place of pain or wound. Or, you know, we see even the way that, you know, modern music has developed from a lot of pain, you know, especially the Africans in the Americas, you know, that was in that slavery, and what brought forth, you know, the blues and the soul and the jazz and the, you know, the funk and the, you know, something comes from the pain, something comes from the scar. You know, spirit, the soul is always stronger. You know, we can contaminate all of those elements of the earth, but in essence, the soul can always kind of, you know, burn it all to the ground and restart, you know, and we rise from the ashes again. And that's kind of the theme of coming into Aries again. You know, we can say that, you know, it is a part of agricultural narrative, but it's also a part of a further back before those 10,000 years. It was part of an initiatory, an orientational narrative, which I feel like is also, you know, the Three of Wands, that we're having this happening. It's the outburst into the world. It was all the conquering energy that came along through Europe, which I very much felt, you know, the energy of being here, both in Peru, but also being here in Argentina, you know, the density of that greed that was in the longing for, you know, here in Buenos Aires, that was the place where they were sailing back to Europe with all the silver and the gold, and, you know, the, you know, and especially from the Spanish, you know, they were very interested in gold, but really underneath that kind of that seeking of gold was actually the what we know in the alchemy of the seeking of the soul, the seeking of the integration of the kind of philosopher's stone or the Ark of the Covenant or whatever it's been called over these times. But it's representative of the gold element. So that
interesting. Yeah. So I'm just trying to rebound on something that you said about the integration of the different parts. Like if we don't integrate all the parts and if we keep on rejecting, what I get is like it will keep on coming back through different doors at different points of time until we integrate it fully. So like right now talking about this greed part of integration, if it's not integrated, it's only going to reveal more and more, whether it's in part of the personality, like at the individual relationship, greed in individual relationship, or with regard to relationship between countries or continents or civilizations, And I think this is a kind of feeling that I'm having is this whole solar eclipse can be, if we as a collective is matured enough, can be used as a portal to go and look at all these and let's say not integrated parts of humanity as a whole, and what can we do rather than trying to keep on pushing with the same narrative that is going on and saying, okay, the Russians are the bad people or this group is like, again, segregating within the humanity, like there are these parts which are good, these parts which are bad. Again, we go into that polarity rather than bringing it into the unity kind of stuff.
Yeah, I feel from what you're saying, I also feel this clear sign of, what is actually being warred around, that there is a certain like, that's the border between this body and that body. And, Ukraine and the NATO nations pushing, further towards, Russia, and Russia being like, well, there was not agreement that you would push further, in east of the wall, you agreed to not push NATO further, and then this tension because of, and we can see that because we can see through the Cargill, Monsanto, and all of these companies that are interested in the soil, basically in agricultural.
The black soil of Ukraine.
Exactly. It's a BlackRock that's in contract here, and it's all these military, investments for these different narratives of, no, this is the way we need to navigate with that, place in our body. If we look at our earth as the body, it's like, one part is saying, no, we know what to do with that part of the body. No, we know what to do with that part of the body. And there is disease, there's tension. And so once we kind of, look further back in the patterns that have kind of perpetuated this, which we kind of have to look back 10,000 years, it's the agricultural, the privatization of land, rather than recognizing where are the land marking its own boundaries between that land spirit and the beginning of another land spirit, where are the bodies clear? Like as we look in our body, if we look inside, okay, that's the clear boundaries of our heart. Okay, that's the clear boundary of our liver. That's the clear boundary of our spleen. And it has like a certain, pronunciation of a form. It's like, okay, that's the organ. This is that organ. And you can see it that it kind of pronounces a certain form in the land. Also, you can see, here clearly there's a river. And then on the other side of the river, there's almost like a new land spirit. There's a new part that brings other qualities, and I feel like there's a certain invitation now to begin to listen more to the land rather than to project into the land and cut borders through. You see how the borders are cut right through a mountain, and then it's like, the lands that doesn't, why is there a border there? There's not a new threshold of a new body, so I feel like the reshaping of borders that have happened, over, many hundreds of thousands of years, and the recognition of certain tribes that have lived in certain areas, the borders have been more like fluid, where, the more we move into the kind of 10,000 years of like pronouncing these very defined borders where it had an agenda with the soil, you know, that's really where we begin to lose track of our body and the wisdom that it reveals by its shapes and forms and qualities. So I feel like the way that now I see the Mercury being up in the last degrees of Aries is like it's suggesting a stability, you know, and this outburst and the eclipse being in the Three of Wands, which is very much, you know, the outburst, the conquering energy, the direction out into the world, the longing. You can say in the greed, there's a longing behind it for the deeper soul integration. You know, in the soldier, there's the longing to actually really meet and unite life and death, you know, the intimacy with life fully, to actually really be intimate, which is also meaning to be intimate with the unknown of, is there going to be fruits or food on the table tomorrow? That is the intimacy of the mystery. And that is what I'm seeing, you know, that Mercury is beginning to whisper is like, are we interested actually to become very intimate with the mystery? And so therefore Mercury reminds us that we are travelers. We are moving through different territories, being guided, being directed. And if we listen to direction rather than, you know, there's a certain threshold where we kind of over these 10,000 years have also more and more and more been taught or suggested, you know, by the narrative to be, you know, making sure we have, you know, what we need. And there's this hyper safety, hyper survival mode where, you know, love comes later, you know? Okay, so when we've taken care of survival, then we can begin to love or unite with the miracle magic that's unfolding in life, rather than if we get really intimate with our direction. And maybe sometimes it's very uncertain parts of that journey, you know. That's why I feel Mercury reminds us of that we have to sometimes let go of certain, you know, journeys that we've been very stable in, to stabilize where we are and stabilize in our direction, which is in our body, moving with the body that we're also a part of as this earth, as this solar system, moving through, you know, the you know, around the black hole. So we are a body moving, a bigger body, you know, and we're a cell in that. And so that's why I feel like this theme of the Chiron revealing these parts of the wounds, the nitty-gritty gnarly that we really have to have a look at, because that's the very core of our gift. You know, it's almost like that journey through the underworld that happens when the scorpion stings you with its venom. It's that venom that's going to bring death, which is what's going to bring the deepest intimacy with life. It's that edge of being so intimate with death and being so confrontational with death is also being so connected with reality, because every breath in is more life and every breath out is death. You know, we are in between life and death every single moment, and that intimacy is kind of taken out of what we see in the narratives of what's unfolding. You know, when the elder was telling the story, or when the tribe gathered around the sacrifice of the animal that we're going to eat, you know, now all of this is pushed into the shadow of, you know, people eating meat. They've never seen an animal die. You know, they've never been close to an animal dying. So all of this pushing away from grief or pain, or, you know, medicating all the, you know, the depression, or the, you know, people, you know, massive collective movement of suicidal situations, very strong anxiety, hyper, you know, stimulating, you know, a culture full of addiction. Yes. You know, I love this kind of saying of a healthy culture creates connection or bonding, and an unhealthy connection or an unhealthy culture creates addiction. And we've really come into a culture that's addicted to life, or addicted to holding on, or addicted to kind of the neurosis of the individual. You know, instead of surrendering to a collective entity or a collective earth being that's directing us, kind of surrendering to our destiny, there's a certain way that that I see now the return happens very much when we come into the realization that the very core of our wound is the very magic of our gift and the very blessing. It's almost like, you know, there's Martin Prechtel speaks about how grief and praise is the same thing, you know? It's the same energy, giving thanks to life and grieving everything we've lost, you know? It's the same energy. It's just to become ultimately really intimate with life. And I feel like, yeah, there's a moment now where we can look upon the journey and we can see what we want to push away. And what we want to push away is the very thing that is right now. It's time to bring that closer, because that is the very part we're actually needing to complete the whole puzzle piece. So I feel like, yeah, we can say this in many different ways, but that's feels like it's the distilled essence of it.
So,
And also now I want to, yeah.
yeah, Andreas. So, for example, if you are talking to people on an individual basis, what could they expect for the coming, let's say, the new cycle that is revealing, and especially the starting of the cycle with the solar eclipse, at least in the Northern American region? What can we expect for on an individual level? Can you just speak onto that, and also on a collective level, especially for the US?
Yeah.
For a couple of minutes on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I see, because the US has also been kind of like the, you know, the push out of the British Empire, you know, like the way that has then, you know, revealed a certain, you could say, destiny of a body that has had so many dynamics. That is a very long conversation, but I feel like, you know, as the eclipse moves up and it's gonna maximize, you know, the maximum eclipse is happening in this little town in the middle of the desert, actually, you know, a little bit outside of this town called Nazas in Mexico. And then it's moving up through the borders and up through Texas and up through, you know, crossing also New York State. And, you know, it's moving, you know, from the Atlantic over across the North American continent, you know, Turtle Land, the ancient, you know, place of the eagle. Or, you know, you could say it's kind of in the native traditions of these lands. There's kind of always been a narrative of like the northern being the eagle or the vision, and then the southern, as we go, you know, Central America and further down, is the snake, and in the middle we have, you know, 𝐀𝐧𝐝, or, you know, the winged serpent. You know, we have the integration between the winged, you know, the feathered one, and the reptilian, you know, the one who sees the ultraviolet light, the one who sees into the further wavelengths that are beyond the ultraviolet waves, and then the snake that sees infrared, that sees below, you know, that sees all the radio waves and, you know, the microwaves, and, you know, way into the slower waves. You know, these are spectrums that, you know, we don't perceive with our visuals, you know, eye, but these are realities that are happening. You know, we know very much how FM or AM wavelength, a radio wave, can come across a mountain because it's a very long wave. And once we go over on the other side of our visible spectrum, you know, from ultraviolet and into gamma rays, X-rays, you know, we have very short wavelengths that, you know, can destroy. You know, we have everything from the creator to the sustainer to the destroyer. So these are very also archetypal energies of the invisibles and the kind of layers that we see in another wavelength that is part of our bigger body. So I feel like, you know, recognizing what is the destiny and the integrational part of the United States and kind of Mexico is the integration and the learning of the suicide in the mind, like the shamanic death process. And that's why, you know, it got stuck with the Jesus on the cross narrative, you know, because Jesus on the cross, no one else has to go through the death process, which is also a part of the shamanic traditions where someone is buried in the ground for 3 days, with a straw to breathe, but to become hollow bone, to become a collective oriented being, to give oneself over to serve the collective. But it's not an abandoning of the self. It's actually a freedom from the self that aligns one much further with the whole body that we're in, and the recognition that we are a bigger body and we're moving as a bigger body. And so therefore the kind of learning process that the states are going through is to learn to suicide that hyper individualized culture, or psychologically crucify it, like a shamanic death process. Because now, as the population is reflecting that through this depression and suicidal thoughts, and then they are medicating that to track it down, it's like, no. This is great. Actually, this is the most intimate point in the initiation where somebody has to face that part. You don't want to take that away from them. You don't want to make that wrong. You don't want to medicate that or distract that. We want to go through that together, that death process. We want to face the deep underworld together. And this is the suggestion of, Mexico, which actually has a lot of, death celebrations. If somebody knows kind of the deep end of Mexican traditions, there's a lot of celebration of death, and that needs to be part of a culture. We need to have that, which we had in ancient, Paleolithic Europe and like Dionysian rites and theater. We had, the sacrifice of the goat, and everybody was there, to see the tragedy or the grief process that we could be in together, and follow that as a very sacred process of becoming very intimate with life, because we're very confronted with death every single moment. So it's really that integrational point between life and death. And I find it almost comical that, we have the trump card, it's the last card of the deck, to play the last card that has, when you don't know what to play anymore, you don't have any cards to play, the trump card can come out and try to win the game, but it's not going to do the thing, because it's beyond the game of the cards, because there's a deeper game of a deeper, mythology that's unfolding, and it's the integration of the eagle. And so it's also, the whole prophecy of when the condor and the eagle flies together, when the mind and the heart, and also when the snake, when the body, when sexuality is embraced, that's why the Christianity cuts that off, because it cuts off the current in the body, which we're then putting in the bank, to be kept and interest rated to some separate group that can then benefit from that current, which is meant to run in the body and not in the bank, so yes. So these are different perspectives that we see. Mercury is like on the staff, the snake is on the staff, suggesting this protective energy of the military complex and the medical industry, which is very much what the entity of Washington D.C. holds, and it's the suggestion to the people, and the kind of deceiving narrative of, we're going to protect you. If you get a disease, we're going to have the medication for you. If we are being attacked, we're going to have the troops to protect you. But in the undercurrents, in the shamanic layers of protection, there's a prayer for attack. And an attack from what? A projected enemy. That's what projection of protection is. So you see
an illusion that there is out there some kind of enemy waiting for you. So if you look at the US narrative in Washington, D.C. about the whole military industrial complex, is that we have to protect you from a potential threat, enemy, that can come from another country or even from outside the space, from an extraterrestrial thing. So you give up your power and we protect you. So you become our subjects, something like that.
Exactly. And that's probably even going to be the next layer of the narrative. It's like, okay, now when we're learning with technology to project things in the sky, and we can have like simulation of ETs coming, and we can even become very much more advanced Hollywood narrative of the victim, perpetrator, savior, which is really a narrative that we have to jump out onto and become the directors ourselves, and the stars. We call them the stars that are kind of running Hollywood, but the stars are moving us as narratives also with that destiny of the earth. So I feel like there's also a point where we can say there is a resting point, because there is a destiny that will unfold regardless. And it's not to kind of like close our eyes to what's happening, but it's also, it's represented very much in what's happening also now. We can see that in Pisces, we have, Saturn and Mars conjunct, and, that's suggesting this, what I was talking about with the Olympics, that we can find magical ways. We can find ways to celebrate the wildfire that lives in our bodies. We can find ways to have nations really be recognized for the different piece of the puzzle they bring, instead of, moving through strategies and projecting, enemies, and then, conquering more lands and like projecting more NATO, and investing more energy in the immature Mars that wants to penetrate the cannon and shoot, the soul energy, the explosive energy through. And we can see this even how the invention of the atom bomb, like working with nuclear energy, like atomic energy, we're beginning to come to a level where we can work with the full spectrum of power. But if this power can be directed to unite us into a new kind of orchestration of music, now we're really speaking celebration, and in the embracement of the different, trombones playing with the different tangerines, or, like that Russia plays a certain instrument with China playing a certain instrument in the States, and that we're all instruments in a different orchestration of a body. And I feel like this is the suggestion that's coming through this eclipse, and it's going to be deceived as many ways of propaganda through the media. But what is happening also at the same time is there is an inner Mercury, there's an inner, that archetype of Mercury, which is way beyond all of those narratives that has been suggested to us for 10,000 years. There is a living body that's, having its own cycle. That celestial entity, that archetype, transmits beyond those narratives all the time. And that information, that injection is always available to all of us. So there's a system beneath and deeper, and I feel like there's a last little component to what's happening in the sky around this, which is the conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter, which is sort of suggesting that this is a time. Uranus is kind of the rebellion, and the rebellion of the individual wanting freedom for itself. And so once we begin to remove our identity into the soul, there's the recognition we are one with the whole. Like we are a collective being. And if we actually embrace that we are an orchestration of beings that seemingly is, separate entities, but they're interlinked, we begin to hear the music, first of all, but we also enter a different layer of freedom from the narrative of the individual. So it's almost like a freedom from the self that wants the freedom, so it's a deeper liberation. And there is Jupiter there now with the lightning strike, which is to kind of bring an expansive energy and a pointing to that ego that wants to rebel, or kind of, and this happens also in the kind of quote unquote like conscious community that wants to say they, the Illuminati, or they, the patriarchy, or they, the 1%, or these are the 1% that also lives in us. And if we begin to see why are we projecting this scapegoat of the Trump card out? What are we playing? Well, what's the game that's being played here? And there's an element of, Jupiter is ruling Sagittarius, and it's Jupiter, if it was just a little bit bigger, it would be a sun, but it's still a planet. So you could say it's the integration of the ego. It's the time where the ego becomes so kind of big or full of itself that it's suggesting that all of that energy moving to a whole different stage of expression. So it's not to deny the ego, but it's to actually bring it to its full shining potential, which is then to move the personality into the soul. Because the personality wants that individualized shining part. So it wants to kind of scoop in the soul to kind of shine that forth and gain more personality and gain more freedom or more kind of, land for itself to feel more powerful in its identity, rather than the soul identity. So removing that kind of ego or expanding it into a collective perspective, it's like, if I have more access to more land, that means I can invite more people into that land and share. I have more to share. I have more to I have more to circulate. It's not all just to be mine. It's actually to help to integrate the bigger part of my body with the others. That happens to be, if I've been given this piece of land, as what's happening also here in Dragonland, which it's been called Amaru, which is the Quechua word for dragon. This is to realize that dragon is the group being, and it's the integration between the bird and the reptilian, the full spectrum from the infrared to the ultraviolet and beyond. It's the full spectrum of being that emanates beyond this body, that begins to become the waves that we don't perceive with our eyes. But that dragon is returning. And so we're beginning to see land calling people that here's this narrative and here's this longing in their hearts. Now we're coming into the new cycle with Venus. Mercury is moving into its new cycle, in Aries. So now there's a new suggestion, of, okay, we're moving into another narrative. We're coming from the opposite end of the spectrum, which was happening in when there was the South Node eclipse in October last year, which was when the war in Palestine, Israel bursted out, and the Hamas and like that conflict began. And that was really a glimpse into what we're moving away from, the narrative that we're moving away from. We're like these borders and these kind of different groups of people, we're one being. We're one being with so many magical components and so many diverse pieces. If we put them all together, we have quite a magical unfolding storyline, so I feel like we're teasing ourselves with like kind of like a disharmonic note to suggest perhaps a different expansive freedom and a different structure with our passion, so that would be the two conjunctions going on with Mars and Saturn, and the expansion up with Jupiter and Uranus, bringing deeper freedom in Taurus. So that's also like, okay, we're ready to bring that into steady Earth, the fixed Earth sign. So this is really the theme that we're having really concentrated today and tomorrow and the next kind of coming time, the next week or so. So yeah, this is in essence, kind of brought to essence what I see and perceive through the eclipse.
Okay, thank you, Andreas, for sharing your insights and I can see this esoteric nature in what you're trying to explain with what's happening right now, and also all the different layers that we can go and look into this particular eclipse that is coming tomorrow in the US, in Mexico, and other places. So we have like a couple of minutes to wind up the whole thing. We are already 1 hour, past 1 hour now. We have been discussing on these various aspects. So do you have any last things to talk about or share with us about anything that you want to go further down, or maybe something that you would suggest to people about this eclipse, or there is something that they need to observe, they can observe in the coming days, let's say?
Yes, I feel like yeah, there's also an element of, knowing where it lands in people's individual chart, and that's also giving a deeper insight to where does it impact a person, because this is somehow speaking to how it's impacting all of us, and the themes that it's kind of bringing up the consideration around, and the conversation of what is moving, in a bigger picture for all of us. But for an individual, I also feel like that's the kind of funny place that we're in right now. It's actually like becoming very intimate with what is happening in the collective is also becoming very intimate with this shift that's happening between individualized oriented culture and a collective oriented culture. And I would say one of the most important parts in that transition of that identity and the orientation from individual. And this is very important to say, that it's not the neglection of the individual, it's the inclusion in a collective body of a being. So, and that then circulates way more life. If we're circulating life with the mountains, with the river, with the animals, with the plants, with each other in a totally different way, there's a much bigger celebration to unfold. So I feel like celebration is a key component, and also at the same time the grief, like that element between grief and praise, like the gratitude and the grief of what also has been very painful. Important to really be between that, that very intimate fine line between life and death, and the intimacy that happens there, and then the urgency of the love that outpours from that place, because there is an intimacy in being there, because we're with whoever we're with, or in the place that we're in, and we might as well just in a moment be gone, or they might be, so the gratitude, I feel like, is a major shift in this, and also kind of an acceptance, that we've had this journey. It's easy to feel guilty or project or blame, onto the patriarch of what we have journeyed as a collective being. But I feel like trusting that we needed to learn something, and also trusting that, okay, what do we learn, and then where do we move on from here? And what are these kind of elements trying to kind of point, to, and what are the parts of us that actually needs more love, not less, or not to be pushed away? So I feel like that's kind of the general themes that are moving, and that one can take into consideration as an individual. But I also feel like one of the most important things that I feel like all of us have right in the confrontation right now is also to become really intimate with this wave of suicidal depression, anxiety, and to actually trust those places, those deep, dark places in the underworld that are key components. When Mercury goes into the underworld, he meets Hecate, and the blind spot of Hecate in the depth, the core of the underworld, the deepest and darkest of the underworld, her blind spot is Helios, which is the highest of the heights. It's the yin and the yang. It's the, the white in the black part, and the, and in the same way, in the white part, the black, that is the core of, so feeling like that in the core of darkness, there is the light, and in the core of light, there is darkness, to embrace those as balancing, dancing components, and that, yeah, nothing is really to be blamed, or like this victim, perpetrator, savior triangle that we've been playing out, and that all of the, many of the Hollywood suggested narratives are bringing us into. There is another layer of, the victim becoming the creator, and the the persecutor or the perpetrator becoming the challenging component, which is a beautiful trickstery energy, you know, like Mercury brings that counterculture and liberates us from dogma. You know, in some Native American tradition, there's the peace prayer with the pipe, and they have one component in that dance that dances the opposite direction of everyone else, and this person is praying for war. Because we need to include this component. We cannot push this component away, but we need to become intimate with it. So we need to, in the end of that journey, hear what that person has to say. What was the archetypal energy oracling through that person and holding that archetype? What was the whisper from death? What was the whisper, you know, of Ragnarok, you know, from the Norse mythology, or, you know, the apocalypse, you know? What's the next threshold that we're moving into, you know? So I feel like this is a huge threshold that we're with, you know. In the next coming years, there's a lot going on, and maybe we can have a different conversation about the different thresholds that are coming up the next few years. But for now, this is very much the quintessence of the eclipse in my interpretation and in my sensing. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. I love this journey with you. I feel like there's such an intimacy in also having these conversations, and I'm very grateful for you to invite me today. And so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. And I would love to go into those different thresholds, and especially the Norse mythologies, you know, about Thor and Odin. That would be really interesting to dive deep into that world. Which is very less known other than through Marvel comics, you know. So one last thing.
Twisted narrative,
yeah,
you know?
Again, that's the thing. How can people get in touch with you? Do you have a website, or how can people follow you?
They can, at this point, I'm on an email that maybe you can put under here if people want to participate, maybe the Mercury journey, or participate events that I'm doing in Europe this summer. But at this point, they can also find me just through my name, Andreas Dreki. So maybe you can put the information down here.
Definitely, I'll do that.
I'm on the different social media platforms, and there they can also see different events, and can just also contact me directly if there's an inquiry about a further session or a certain. Also, I do kind of a deeper, narrow, distilled down read of, you know, a person's connection to a certain transit, or a general read, or if somebody comes with an inquiry. So feel free to reach out personally to me on a private message with that, if you feel the calling to deepen in within these realms. So yeah, thank you for having me here, and such a pleasure to speak of this.
Yes, definitely. So I'll add your email and also a couple of profiles on social media where you are, so that people can get in touch with you, or at least follow you if they're interested in what the different discussions that we had in the last more than 60 minutes now. So looking forward to another layer of conversations on different themes or different thresholds or dates, specific dates, or different conjunctions. That's coming up with definitely a look on the collective more than the individual. As you said, it's not denying the individual, but we are moving as a species, for me, towards something much more on a collective level, even beyond the civilization, like Western versus the Eastern, all these kind of dichotomies, moving away from that and moving in a species level, like, okay, what are we here to do? And do we resonate with the earth and the planets and everything around us? Yeah. So thank you, Andreas, once again for your time and for your in-depth insights on these different themes that we discussed today.